Zanti. He was a loyal yet reserved tycoon, the owner of a global holding company marked by a past of solitude. She, his childhood friend, a free spirit but now pregnant, homeless and penniless, desperately seeks him out as her last resort. The reunion is bittersweet. He sees her exhausted and in her fragility, and the image of Laura, so vulnerable and carrying a new life, deeply moves him. In an act of compassion and an unconscious desire to fill the void in his own life, Matthew takes her in and declares, "I'll raise this child as if it were my own." Watch this story to the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like stories of love and romance, subscribe to this channel, leave a comment. We post videos like this every day. Continuing. The rain hammered against the windows of the 30th floor of the most imposing office building in Manhattan. But Matthew Vanderbilt didn't even lift his eyes from the financial reports spread across his mahogany desk. At 38, he had built a business empire that spanned 3 continents, transforming a small logistics company inherited from his father into a global holding company valued in the billions. Every decision, every move calculated with the precision of a chess player, had led him to the top of a lonely mountain where the air was thin and the company scarce. The office reflected his personality: straight lines, neutral colors, everything in its place. There were no personal photographs, only framed diplomas and business awards that attested to his competence, but nothing that revealed the soul of the man behind the success. Matthew lived a meticulously organized routine: gym at 5 in the morning, office at 7, strategic meetings until late afternoon, solitary dinner in his mansion in Greenwich, Connecticut, reading reports until he fell asleep. It was a predictable, controlled life, devoid of emotional surprises that could destabilize the equilibrium he had worked so hard to build. Across town, Laura Drummond walked through the streets of downtown with heavy steps, one hand instinctively protecting her 7-month pregnant belly. At 35, she carried on her shoulders the weight of broken dreams and shattered promises. The vibrant young woman who had once left New York City in search of adventures around the world now returned as a ghost of herself, marked by the scars of a toxic relationship that had ended in the worst possible way, with abandonment and the discovery that she was pregnant. Laura had been many things: a tour guide in Europe, an English teacher in Asia, a freelance photographer in Latin America. She had always believed that the world was too big to settle for an ordinary life, but life had taken it upon itself to show her that not all dreams come true. The man who had promised to share his life with her disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy, taking with him not only her hopes for a future together, but also her savings and her dignity. Now homeless, penniless, and without close family, she was forced to swallow her pride and seek out the only person who might still remember the courageous girl she once was. The memory of Matthew Vanderbilt had haunted her for weeks. They had been inseparable in childhood, running through the streets of the middle-class neighborhood where they grew up, sharing secrets under the old oak tree in his backyard, promising eternal friendship with the sincerity that only children possess. But life had separated them when she turned 18 and decided that the world was bigger than those familiar streets. Matthew had tried to dissuade her, asked her to stay, hinted at feelings that she, at the time, had not been able to recognize or reciprocate. She had left anyway, leaving behind not only the neighborhood, but also the boy who had looked at her with tears in his eyes on the day of her departure. In the years that followed, Laura had followed Matthew's meteoric rise from afar through business magazines and sporadic news reports. The shy, dreamy boy had become one of the most powerful men in the country, but she had never had the courage to contact him. What right did she have to interrupt his successful life with her inconvenient presence? Now, however, desperation spoke louder than pride. That's how, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, Laura found herself in the imposing lobby of the building where Vanderbilt Holdings was headquartered. Her brown hair, once lustrous, was dull and tied in a simple bun. The black dress she wore, one of the few that still fit her, tried to disguise her condition, but the prominent belly made it impossible to hide the truth. The worn boots betrayed the miles traveled on foot, saving every penny to survive another day. The security guard looked at her suspiciously as she approached the reception desk. The receptionist, an impeccably dressed young woman, raised an eyebrow when she saw her. "Good afternoon. I'd like to speak to Mr. Matthew Vanderbilt," Laura said, trying to keep her voice steady despite the tremor she felt in her legs. "Do you have an appointment?" The question came with a look that ran over Laura from head to toe, clearly judging her appearance. "No, but I'm a friend of his, Laura Drummond. He's known me since childhood." The receptionist exchanged a skeptical look with the security guard. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Vanderbilt doesn't receive visitors without an appointment. If you'd like to leave your card..." "But please," Laura interrupted, and for the first time her voice failed, revealing the desperation she was trying to hide. "Just tell him Laura Drummond is here. He'll want to see me." The silence that followed seemed eternal. Laura felt the curious glances of the employees who passed through the lobby, whispers that she couldn't decipher, but that she imagined were about her disheveled appearance in that environment of power and sophistication. She was about to give up when she heard a familiar voice echo through the hall. "Laura?" She turned slowly, and there he was, Matthew Vanderbilt, taller than she remembered, wearing a custom-made suit that cost more than she had spent in an entire year. His dark hair was perfectly combed, his face more angular than in his youth, marked by responsibility and power. But the eyes, those brown eyes she knew so well, were still the same, now wide with shock as he recognized her. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The powerful CEO and the pregnant and desperate woman stared at each other across the marble lobby, and 17 years of separation dissolved like mist in the sun. The silence in the Vanderbilt Holdings lobby stretched like a rope about to break. Matthew descended the steps of the staircase with measured steps, each movement calculated as always, but Laura could feel the tension in his shoulders, the way he slightly clenched his fists. The employees around them seemed to have paused their activities, pretending not to observe the unusual encounter between the country's most reserved CEO and a visibly pregnant woman in dire straits. "Laura," he repeated, now closer, his voice controlled, but with a note of disbelief he couldn't disguise. His eyes quickly scanned her figure, registering every detail. The pallor, the excessive thinness contrasting with her prominent belly, the simple clothes that had seen better days. "What are you doing here?" She swallowed hard, trying to find the words she had rehearsed for weeks. "Matthew, I need to talk to you. It's important." He hesitated, clearly conscious of the curious glances around them. The Matthew Vanderbilt she had known would never have cared about the opinions of others, but this man in front of her seemed to carry the weight of a reputation built brick by brick. "This isn't the appropriate place." His voice sounded colder than he intended, and he saw the flash of pain that crossed her eyes. "Please," Laura whispered, and there was a fragility in her voice that made him recoil internally. "I have no one else." The words hit Matthew like a punch to the gut. The courageous girl, who had once left his life in search of adventures around the world, was here, vulnerable and desperate, asking for his help. Part of him wanted to hug her immediately, protect her as he had so many times in childhood when other boys had bothered her. Another part, the one that had learned to protect itself through years of disappointments and superficial relationships, screamed for him to be cautious. "Come on," he finally said, indicating the elevator. "Let's talk in my office." The ride to the 30th floor took place in an awkward silence. Laura watched the reflection of the two of them in the elevator mirror. He impeccable in his designer suit, she carrying the marks of difficult months. The difference between their worlds had never seemed so glaring. Matthew, in turn, fought against memories that insisted on resurfacing. Laura at 17, laughing as they ran through the rain. Laura whispering secrets in the darkness of the backyard. Laura crying in his arms on the day her father died. Matthew's office was exactly as Laura had imagined. Imposing, cold, functional. He closed the door and pointed to one of the leather armchairs in front of his desk. "Sit down. Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "Water, please." Her voice came out hoarse, and she realized she hadn't had anything to drink for hours. Matthew activated the intercom and asked for water and some cookies to be brought up. The simple gesture of care made Laura's eyes fill with tears, but she blinked quickly to chase them away. She couldn't appear more pathetic than she already did. "So," he said, leaning back in his executive chair, his fingers interlaced on the desk. 17 years, you just disappeared and now reappear like this." He gestured vaguely towards her belly. Laura took a deep breath. "I know how this must look. I know I have no right to be here after all this time." The words came in bursts, as if she feared he would interrupt her. "But I have no other options, Matthew. I've tried everything, looked for a job, tried to ask for help in other places, but where's the father?" The question came sharp, direct. "He disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy." Laura forced herself to keep her gaze fixed on his, refusing to demonstrate the humiliation she felt. "He took what was left of my savings and just vanished." Matthew felt a familiar anger grow in his chest, the same he felt in childhood when he saw Laura being hurt. What kind of man does that? "The kind I chose to trust," she replied bitterly. "It seems I have a special talent for making the wrong decisions." The secretary entered discreetly, left a tray with water and cookies on the side table, and left without a word. Laura drank the water as if it were the most precious liquid in the world, and Matthew watched her trembling hands holding the glass. "How much longer do you have?" he asked, indicating her belly. 7 months. Laura instinctively touched her belly. "It's a girl." Something stirred in Matthew's chest upon hearing that. A girl. Laura was going to have a daughter. "What about your parents, your siblings?" "Mom died 3 years ago, cancer. Dad, well, you know how he always felt about my adventures. When I called him to tell him about the pregnancy, he said I had made my bed and now I should lie in it." Her voice faltered slightly. "My brothers followed his example." Matthew closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered well Laura's stern father, the man who had never approved of his daughter's dreams of seeing the world. The irony was cruel. Laura had sought freedom and found abandonment, while he had built a gilded cage around himself. "What exactly do you want from me, Laura?" The question sounded harsher than he intended, but he needed to understand her intentions. "I'm not asking for money," she hastened to clarify. "Well, not exactly. I'm asking for a chance, a job, anything. I can work almost until I give birth, and then I'll figure something out." "Where are you staying?" Laura hesitated. "At a boarding house downtown. It's not much, but..." "Are you eating properly? Getting prenatal care?" The direct questions caught her off guard. I do what I can." Matthew stood up abruptly, starting to pace behind his desk. The movement helped him think, but also revealed his internal agitation. Laura was in danger, she and the child. The boarding house she mentioned was in an area known for violence, and anyone could see that she was malnourished. Matthew, Laura, stood up too, her voice laden with urgency. "I know you don't owe me anything. I know I left and hurt you. But please, for our friendship, for the child on the way, help me." He stopped pacing and stared at her. The proud and independent Laura he had known was asking for help, and that only showed how desperate her situation was. But agreeing to help her would mean opening a door he had kept closed for years. It would mean exposing himself again to the feelings he had tried to bury. "I need to think," he finally said. "This is complicated." Complicated how? There was a challenging tone in her voice now, a glimpse of the combative Laura of old. "Laura, you disappeared from my life without explanation. Now you come back pregnant asking for help. Do you have any idea how this could affect my reputation? My business?" The words came out harsher than he intended, and he saw how they hit her. Laura stepped back half a step, as if she had been slapped. "I understand," she said, her voice controlled but icy. "Your reputation is more important than an old friendship." "That's not it." "That's exactly it." "Lars?" Laura grabbed her worn purse and headed for the door. "Sorry to have bothered the mighty Matthew Vanderbilt with my insignificant problems." "Laura, wait." He took a step towards her, but she was already opening the door. "Thank you for your time and the water," she said without turning around. "I won't bother you anymore." The door closed with a soft click, but it echoed in the office like thunder. Matthew stood still, looking at the closed door, a storm of emotions brewing in his chest. Anger at himself for having been so cold. Fear of getting involved again with someone who had already abandoned him once, and a growing concern for the safety of Laura and the child. He went to the window and looked at the street below, searching for her figure in the crowd. When he finally spotted her, walking slowly along the sidewalk with a hand on her back, a sign that she was in pain, something broke inside him. Matthew picked up the phone and dialed an internal number. "Sandra, I need you to cancel all my appointments for the rest of the day, and I want you to hire a discreet private investigator. I need information on Laura Drummond, where she's living, her current situation, everything." He paused. "And Sandra, no one can know about this. No one." 3 days passed before Matthew received the investigator's report. 3 days during which he barely managed to concentrate on the meetings, the financial reports, the decisions he normally made with mechanical ease. The image of Laura walking along the sidewalk, a hand on her back, pregnant and alone, haunted him with every moment of silence. The report arrived in a discreet folder, delivered personally by a middle-aged man who spoke only what was necessary, before disappearing. Matthew closed the office door and opened the document with hands that trembled imperceptibly. What he read made him clench his fists until his knuckles turned white. Laura was living in a boarding house room of 30 square feet, sharing a bathroom with 10 other tenants. The place had been flagged by the health department twice in the last year. She survived on sporadic online translation jobs, earning a pittance that barely covered basic food. Prenatal care was being done at the free clinic, with consultations, spaced too far apart for a high-risk pregnancy. And it was high risk, according to the medical report the investigator had managed to access. Laura had high blood pressure and signs of anemia, but it was the last piece of information that destroyed him. She had fainted in the street the day before, being rescued by a passerby who took her to the hospital, discharged the same day, but with an express recommendation for rest and proper nutrition, luxuries she simply couldn't afford. Matthew closed the report and rested his forehead in his hands. What kind of man had he become? What kind of person left an old friend, a pregnant woman, in that situation out of pride or fear of complications? The next morning, he was standing in front of the boarding house downtown. The 3-story building had peeling paint and a smell of mildew that reached the sidewalk. Matthew had never set foot in a place like this, and the disparity between his world and Laura's had never seemed so brutal. The doorman, an elderly man in shabby clothes, looked at him suspiciously. "Looking for someone?" "Laura Drummond, room 23. "Ah, the pregnant lady." The man shook his head. "Poor thing. Had a bad spell yesterday again. Neighbor had to help." Matthew climbed the steps 2 at a time, ignoring the creaking of the old wood and the damp stains on the walls. When he reached the 2nd floor, he heard the sound of someone vomiting. His heart jumped as he recognized that it was coming from room 23. He knocked on the door, first gently, then more insistently. "Laura, it's me, Matthew." The noise stopped. Slow footsteps approached the door, and he heard her voice, weak. "Go away, Matthew. Open the door, please. I don't want your pity." "It's not pity." He leaned his forehead against the cheap wooden door. "It's remorse." The silence stretched for long seconds before he heard the latch being turned. The door opened only a crack, revealing one of Laura's eyes, framed by disheveled hair and skin that was too pale. "What do you want?" she asked, but her voice sounded exhausted, without the anger of 3 days ago. "I want to apologize, and I want to get you out of here." Laura opened the door completely, and Matthew had to try hard not to show the shock he felt. She was visibly thinner, except for her belly that seemed disproportionately large on her frail body. There were dark circles under her eyes, and he could see that she had been crying. "Come in," she said, stepping away from the door. The room was even worse than he had imagined. A single bed leaning against the wall, a small wardrobe that had seen better days, a folding table with an old laptop and some papers scattered around. A small window let in little light, and the smell of mildew was almost unbearable. "Laura," he began, but she interrupted him. "You don't need to say anything, I understand. You have a life, a reputation to maintain. I shouldn't have shown up like that, without warning." "You're sick." It wasn't a question. She sat on the edge of the bed, a hand on her belly. "It's just morning sickness, it'll pass. It's almost 11 in the morning. Then pre-lunch sickness." She tried to smile, but the effort seemed to drain even more of her strength. Matthew knelt before her, taking her hands in his. They were cold and trembling. "You're coming with me. Now." "Matthew, it's not a request, Laura. It's a statement. You can't stay here, neither you nor the baby." He squeezed her hands. "Remember when we were kids and you insisted on climbing that tall tree in the Santana's backyard? You always fell and got hurt, but you never let anyone help. You said you could do it alone." Laura looked at him curiously, not understanding where he was going with this, until the day you fell and broke your arm. You cried so much, not from pain, but from anger at having to accept help. He touched her face gently. "You've always been too stubborn to ask for help, even when you desperately needed it. And you've always been too protective," she murmured, "even when I didn't deserve it." "You always deserved it, Laura. Always." Something in his voice made her look at him more closely. There was an intensity in his eyes that she recognized, an old pain that had never been fully healed. "Why have you never married?" The question came out before she could censor herself. Matthew let go of her hands and stood up, walking to the small window. "Who said I never married?" Laura's heart skipped a beat. You're married?" "I was, for 2 years." His voice sounded distant. "Camilla, a socialite that my mother chose for me. Perfect relationship on paper. Same social class. Same circles, same superficial interests." Laura felt as if the air had become thinner in the small room. What happened? Matthew took a while to answer, still looking out the window. On our honeymoon, one night when she had had a bit too much to drink, she confessed something to me. She said she had only married me for the money and the status, that she never loved me, never even tried to love me, and that the man she really loved had agreed to maintain a discreet relationship with her as long as she didn't lose the comfort I provided. Oh God, Matthew. She laughed when she saw my shocked expression. She said I was naive for believing that anyone could truly love me, that I was just a means to an end. He turned to face her. You know what was worse? She was right about one thing. I never really loved her either. I married her because it was expected, because it fit into the plan I had drawn up for my life. Laura felt tears prick her eyes. How long ago was that? 7 years. Since then, I've never allowed myself to feel anything genuine for anyone. It was safer that way. He paused. Until you showed up in my office. The silence that followed was charged with unspoken emotions. Laura understood now his initial coldness, his reluctance to help her. He had built walls around his heart, and she had appeared as an uninvited wrecking ball. I have something to tell you too, she said softly. About the real reason I left. 17 years ago. Matthew approached again, sitting on the only chair in the room. It wasn't just because of my dreams of seeing the world, Laura continued, avoiding his gaze. It was because I was in love with you, and it scared me. The words fell into the room like stones in a still lake, creating ripples that spread through the dense air between them. The night before I left, when you tried to convince me to stay, I almost gave up everything. I almost confessed what I felt. But I was afraid, Matthew. Afraid that you wouldn't reciprocate. Afraid of ruining our friendship. Afraid of becoming just another girl crushing on the popular boy in school. She finally faced him. So I ran, like a coward. Matthew watched her in silence, processing the revelation. 17 years of unanswered questions, 17 years wondering what he had done wrong, and now he discovered that Laura had left precisely because she felt the same way he felt. Laura, he began, but she shook her head. You don't need to say anything. I just wanted you to know the truth. After all this, you deserve to know. Laura's words hung in the air like a confession that carried the weight of almost 2 decades. Matthew remained motionless in the chair, his eyes fixed on her, processing not only what he had just heard, but also what it meant for the present. The woman he had loved in silence in his youth, who had left him without explanation, had left precisely because she felt the same thing he did. You were in love with me, he repeated, as if he needed to hear the words again to believe them. Desperately, Laura confirmed, a tear running down her face. And that's why I ran, because I was 18 and thought that love was prison, not freedom. Matthew leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. And now? What do you feel now? The question caught her off guard. Laura looked at her own hands, trying to find an honest answer. Now I know that love is neither prison nor freedom. It's home. It's the place where you belong, even when everything else falls apart. Before Matthew could respond, Laura bent forward with a groan of pain, one hand clutching her belly, the other supporting herself against the wall. Her breathing became labored, and her face paled even more. Laura! Matthew jumped up, kneeling beside her. Oh, what's happening? I don't know, she gasped. A pain, very strong. Matthew looked down and saw a small puddle of liquid forming on the wooden floor. His heart leaped. Even without experience in pregnancies, he knew that this was not normal for 7 months. We're going to the hospital, now! He helped her to her feet, but Laura's legs gave way, and she would have fallen if he hadn't held her. I can't afford a private hospital, she murmured, the pain evident in her voice. I can. Matthew lifted her into his arms, ignoring her weak protests. We're not going to discuss this now. The descent down the boarding house stairs was a nightmare. Laura moaned softly with each step, clinging to his shirt with desperate force. The doorman saw them pass and shook his head with concern. "Did you call an ambulance?" he asked. "I'll take her by car," Matthew replied, already pushing the front door open with his shoulder. His black Mercedes was parked in front of the building, drawing the attention of onlookers. Matthew placed her in the passenger seat carefully, buckled her seatbelt, and ran to the driver's side. As he drove through the congested streets of New York, he called the best obstetrician in the city, Dr. Robert Andrade, one of the doctors at the hospital where his own company maintained a premium corporate plan. "Dr. Andrade, Matthew Vanderbilt, I need you at the hospital now. It's an obstetrical emergency." His voice was controlled, but Laura could sense the barely disguised panic. 7-month pregnancy, possible premature labor. During the trip, Laura squeezed his hand, her breath short and choppy. "Matthew, if anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen." "If it does," she insisted, "promise me you'll take care of her, my daughter." Matthew squeezed her hand, keeping his eyes on the road. "You're going to take care of her yourself. But yes, I promise." The private hospital was a different world from the free clinic where Laura had been receiving prenatal care. Efficient nurses placed her on a gurney as soon as they arrived, and Dr. Andrade, a 50-year-old man with graying hair and reassuring manners, took over the case immediately. "We're going to take her to the obstetrics center," he said to Matthew as they walked through the corridors. "From the description of the symptoms, it may be placental abruption. It's serious, but treatable if we act quickly. She's going to be okay. We're going to do everything in our power. Are you the father?" Matthew hesitated for only a second. "Yes, I'm the father." The next hours passed in a haze of anxiety and waiting. Matthew paced the hospital corridors, called his secretary to cancel all appointments for the week, and faced curious glances from the medical staff who were clearly wondering who this woman was, who had arrived in rags but received VIP treatment on the orders of the powerful CEO. When Dr. Andrade finally appeared, it was already late at night. "How is she?" Matthew stood up immediately. "Stable. We managed to control the situation, but it was a close call. She had dangerously high blood pressure, severe malnutrition, and signs of preeclampsia." The doctor took off his glasses and cleaned them, a gesture that Matthew recognized as stalling for bad news. "Mr. Vanderbilt, I need to be direct with you. If she had arrived here a few hours later, we would have lost both mother and baby." The words hit Matthew like a punch to the gut. "But now they're okay. For now. But Ms. Drummond will need absolute rest for the remainder of the pregnancy. No stress, proper nutrition, constant medical monitoring, and even then, there is a risk of premature delivery at any time. Whatever it takes," Matthew said without hesitation. "Money is no object." Dr. Andrade studied him with curiosity. "May I ask a personal question? The situation in which we found the patient, well, it doesn't match the treatment she's receiving now. How long have you two been together?" Matthew realized that he had reached a defining moment. His answer would determine not only how Laura would be treated by the medical staff, but also how society would see them. Once he publicly assumed paternity of the child, there would be no turning back. "It's complicated," he said finally, "but she's the most important woman in my life, and this child—" He paused, surprised by the truth of the next words. "This child is my daughter in every sense that matters." Dr. Andrade nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. "She's awake and asking to see you. Room 314. Matthew found Laura connected to various machines, but with a slightly better color in her face. She smiled weakly when she saw him enter. "Hi," she whispered. Hi. He approached the bed, taking her hand. How are you feeling? Like a truck ran over me. But the doctor said she's okay. My girl is okay. Thank God. Matthew kissed her forehead. Gently. Laura, we need to talk about some practical things. I know, the hospital costs, she began, but he interrupted her. It's not about money. It's about where you're going to stay when you leave here. The doctor was clear. You need absolute rest and constant care. Laura looked at him with a mixture of gratitude and fear. Matthew, I can't accept any more of your charity. You've already done too much. It's not charity. He took a deep breath, preparing to take the step that would change everything. It's responsibility, because from today on, for all intents and purposes, you are my partner, and this baby is my daughter. Laura's eyes widened. What are you saying? I'm saying that when we leave here, you're coming with me, to my house, as part of my family. He squeezed her hand. This means there will be consequences. The press, my business competitors, my own family. Everyone will question it. They'll investigate your past, your situation, the convenient timing of our reconciliation. Matthew, you can't do this for me. Your reputation, my reputation, isn't worth the lives of you two. His voice was firm, determined. And I'm not doing this just for you, Laura. I'm doing it for myself too. Because for the first time in 7 years, I genuinely care about someone. And because when I thought I might lose you both today, I realized that you two are already my family. Laura closed her eyes, tears running silently. When she opened them again, there was a renewed determination in them. What if I accept? If I go with you? What does that mean for us? Matthew leaned in, bringing his face close to hers. It means we'll figure it out together. It means that this time, neither of us will run. He kissed her then, softly and carefully. A kiss that sealed not only a practical agreement, but a promise to rebuild what had been lost years ago. Outside the room, a nurse took a discreet photo with her cell phone, an image that would be on social media before dawn, marking the beginning of a storm that would test the strength of the decision Matthew had just made. The photo leaked. 3 days later, at the exact moment when Laura was leaving the hospital in Matthew's arms. The image, her in a hospital gown, him carrying her with obvious tenderness, plastered the front pages of the country's leading gossip newspapers with sensational headlines. The tycoon and his mysterious pregnant woman, Matthew Vanderbilt, assumes paternity of secret baby, the billionaire and the abandoned lover. Matthew had anticipated the exposure, but not the speed or the cruelty with which the media would pounce on them. As he settled Laura into the master bedroom of his Greenwich mansion, a suite larger than the entire apartment where she had lived, the phones wouldn't stop ringing. Mr. Vanderbilt, his secretary Sandra called him on the intercom, her voice tense. The People magazine is on the line. They want an official statement about your marital status, and the press office is receiving dozens of calls. Tell everyone there are no comments at this time, Matthew replied, adjusting the pillows behind Laura on the king-size bed. And Sandra, from now on, all matters related to my personal life must go through me directly. Laura watched his movements, seeing how Matthew alternated between gentle care for her and the business-like toughness needed to deal with the image crisis that was forming. Are you regretting it? She asked when he hung up the intercom. Never. The answer came without hesitation. But I'll admit I underestimated the interest this would generate. He wasn't lying completely, but he also wasn't telling the whole truth. That morning, even before picking her up from the hospital, Matthew had received a disturbing call from Helen Vanderbilt, his mother. Matthew, darling, I need to speak with you urgently. The authoritative voice of the family matriarch echoed through the office. About this embarrassing situation that has appeared in the newspapers. Mom, it's not embarrassing. It's my life. Your life affects our family, our businesses, our reputation built over generations. Helen paused calculatedly. I've made a lunch reservation for today. I want to meet this Laura. The tone with which she pronounced Laura's name made Matthew clench his fists. She's recovering. She's not in a condition to receive visitors. Then you come alone. The country club noon. It's not a request, son. Matthew looked at Laura, who was pretending to sleep but clearly heard the conversation. He knew that his mother didn't make social invitations without specific reasons, and they were rarely benevolent ones. At the Greenwich Country Club, Helen Vanderbilt awaited him at a reserved table, impeccable in her Chanel suit, her grey hair pulled back in an elegant bun that she wore like a crown. At 62, she still intimidated seasoned businessmen and powerful politicians with just a glance. "Sit down," she said when Matthew approached, without getting up to greet him. "Mother, let's get straight to the point. This woman, Laura Drummond, has been investigated. I know exactly who she is, where she came from, and what situation she was in when she appeared in your life." Matthew kept his expression neutral, but internally prepared himself for the battle he knew was coming. She disappeared from New York 17 years ago, Helen continued, pulling a leather folder from her purse. Since then, she has accumulated debts in 3 countries, been evicted from apartments in Paris and Barcelona, had unstable relationships with men of dubious background. The last one, an Argentinian named Diego Menendez, has a criminal record for fraud. That has nothing to do with it. Has everything to do with it, Matthew. Helen opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. Because when this information becomes public, and it will, you can be sure, it won't just be your reputation at stake, but the stability of Vanderbilt Holdings. Matthew picked up one of the documents. It was a detailed report on Laura's finances in recent years, including debts in European banks and an invoice from an abortion clinic in Buenos Aires, dated 2 years ago. Where did you get this? I have my resources. Helen took a sip of her martini. The question isn't where I got it, but what I'm going to do with this information. Are you blackmailing me? I'm protecting our family. You're free to have your adventures, darling, but not at the expense of the empire that your grandfather and your father built. Helen leaned forward. This woman is a desperate opportunist who saw in you her last chance for salvation. And you, with your soft heart, fell right into the trap. You don't know Laura. I know women like Laura. Helen's voice became harsher, beautiful, charming, always with a sad story to tell. Your ex-wife Camilla was one of them, remember? At least she had class and proper education. Matthew stood up abruptly. I'm not going to listen to this anymore. Then listen to this. If you insist on this charade, if you formalize any kind of union with this woman, I will use my influence on the board of directors to question your leadership ability. 40% of the company's shares are still in my name, son. Don't forget that. The threat hung in the air like a sword of Damocles. Helen never made empty threats, and Matthew knew that she had the power to deliver on what she promised. You would do this to me? I would do this for our family. Helen put the documents back in the folder. You have 1 week to resolve this situation. Send the woman away. Give her enough money to settle somewhere else, far from New York, and publicly admit that it was a misunderstanding. Otherwise, she didn't need to complete the sentence. Matthew returned to the mansion 2 hours later, finding Laura in the living room, reclining on the couch with a book in her hands. She was wearing one of his silk robes, much too big for her, and had gained a bit of color in her face. The domestic scene hit him with unexpected force. This was the image of home he had always dreamed of having. How was lunch? She asked, marking the page of the book. Complicated. Matthew sat down next to her, pulling her into his arms. "Laura, I need to tell you some things. About my mother, about our situation. She doesn't approve of our relationship. It's more than that." Matthew took a deep breath. "She has information about your past that she can use against us. Debts, past relationships, compromising situations." Laura stiffened in his arms. "What kind of information? Are they true?" "Depends." Laura pulled away to look him in the eyes. "Do you want the summarized version of my mistakes or the complete explanation of the reasons that led me to commit them?" "I want the truth." Laura got up, walking to the window that overlooked the impeccably manicured garden. "The truth is that yes, I accumulated debts. Yes, I got involved with questionable men. And yes," her voice faltered, "there were situations I'm not proud of." Matthew waited, allowing her to tell it at her own pace. "Diego was manipulative, violent. When I found out I was pregnant with him 2 years ago, he forced me to terminate the pregnancy. He said he wasn't going to ruin his life over an accident." Tears began to run down Laura's face. "I didn't want to, Matthew, but I was alone, without money, and he threatened to abandon me with nothing if I didn't do it." Matthew approached her, touching her shoulder gently. "After that, I sank into depression. I spent what I didn't have trying to forget, got involved with people who weren't worth anything because I thought it was what I deserved." She turned to him. "Until I got pregnant again, by another equally terrible man. And this time, I decided that I was going to have this child, even if it killed me. That's when he abandoned me, and I came back to the United States." "Laura, your mother is right about one thing. I am a desperate opportunist. But she's wrong about another. I didn't come after you for your money. I came because you were the only person in the world I could still trust. The only person who might still see something good in me." Matthew pulled her into his arms, kissing the top of her head. "I see everything good in you. Even knowing all this, especially knowing all this." He held her face in his hands. "Because now I understand why you came back, and I understand what courage it took to make the decisions you made." Laura closed her eyes, relieved, but Matthew knew that the confession had only made the situation more complicated. If Helen decided to leak that information, the press would have enough material to destroy not only Laura's reputation, but the legitimacy of his relationship with her. That night, while Laura slept, Matthew received a text message from an unknown number. "See today's papers. It's just the beginning. Your mother isn't the only one with interesting information about the pregnant woman. If you want to keep certain secrets buried, we can talk. I have a proposal that may interest you." The message was unsigned, but Matthew knew that the net was closing in. The decision to protect Laura had unleashed forces that now threatened to consume everything he had built. The bomb exploded on a Monday morning when Matthew was in the office trying to contain the damage from media speculation about his personal life. 3 weekly magazines had published speculative reports about Laura, but nothing that couldn't be controlled with good public relations. He had even begun to believe that he could protect her from the storm when Sandra burst into his office without knocking, her face pale with panic. "Mr. Vanderbilt, you need to see this. Now." She turned on the television on the wall, tuning into a morning gossip show. The host, a middle-aged woman with a predatory smile, held a folder of documents as if it were a trophy. "And now, exclusively, we reveal the true story behind the romance that has been shaking up high society in New York," she announced with calculated drama. Laura Drummond, the mysterious pregnant woman who won the heart of billionaire Matthew Vanderbilt, has a much darker past than anyone imagined. The screen filled with photographs that Matthew recognized immediately, the same ones his mother had shown him at the club. But there were others, worse. Laura at parties in Buenos Aires, visibly drunk. Laura leaving a medical clinic. Debt documents. Police records of Diego Menendez. According to our exclusive documents, the host continued, Laura Drummond accumulated debts of more than 50,000 euros during her stay in Europe, maintained relationships with men involved in criminal activities, and, prepare yourselves for this, had an abortion 2 years ago in Argentina, paid for by one of her suspected boyfriends. Matthew felt the blood run cold in his veins. The camera focused on a medical document, genuine by the stamps and signatures, from the clinic in Buenos Aires. But the most shocking revelation, the host paused dramatically, is that Laura Drummond is not who she claims to be. According to certificates we obtained, she entered into a civil marriage with Diego Menendez in Argentina, becoming Laura Drummond Menendez. A marriage that, according to our lawyers consulted, may still be valid, making her current relationship with Matthew Vanderbilt technically adulterous. Matthew's world crumbled. On the screen, a marriage certificate appeared, dated 2 years ago. There was no divorce recorded. In addition, the host continued relentlessly, sources close to the Vanderbilt family confirm that the matriarch herself, Helen Vanderbilt, is shocked by the revelations and is considering taking legal action to protect the family fortune from a possible gold digger. Sandra turned off the television, but the silence that followed was deafening. The office phone rang incessantly, and Matthew could see from the windows the crowd of reporters and photographers forming at the entrance of the building. "Mr. Vanderbilt," Sandra said cautiously, "what do you want me to do?" Matthew didn't answer. His mind was working frantically, processing the implications. Laura married. Laura technically still married to a criminal. And worse, she had never mentioned it. Why? What else was she hiding? He picked up his cell phone and dialed home. The housekeeper, Eulalia, answered on the third ring. "Eulalia, how is Laura?" "Oh, Mr. Matthew." The woman's voice sounded worried. She saw the television. "She's very upset, sir. She locked herself in her room and doesn't want to talk to anyone." "I'm coming home." The trip back to the mansion was a nightmare. Reporters followed him. Helicopters hovered over his car. And his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Calls from concerned business partners, from members of the board of directors demanding explanations, from lawyers offering their services. And a call that he knew was coming, but that still hit him like a punch. "Helen, I hope you now understand the gravity of the situation." Her voice was icy. "I've called an emergency board meeting for Thursday. You have until then to resolve this situation, or I will take control of the company to protect our interests." Matthew arrived home to find a siege of journalists at the door. He managed to enter through the garage, but could hear the shouts and questions being yelled from outside. Inside the mansion, the silence was oppressive. Eulalia waited for him in the hall, wringing a dish towel in her hands. "She's very upset, Mr. Matthew. She hasn't eaten anything since morning, and the doctor said that stress can be dangerous for the baby." Matthew climbed the steps 2 at a time, finding the door to the master bedroom locked. He knocked softly. "Laura, it's me." "Go away." Her voice came muffled, but he could tell she had been crying. "I need to talk to you." "There's nothing to talk about. You already know everything now." "Open the door, Laura, please." The silence stretched for long minutes before he heard her footsteps approaching. The door opened, revealing an unrecognizable Laura. Disheveled hair, red and swollen. Eyes, her face marked by pain and shame. "Are you satisfied?" she asked, stepping back to let him enter. "Now you know what kind of person I really am." Matthew closed the door behind him, studying her face. "Why didn't you tell me you were married?" "Because I'm not." The answer came explosive, desperate. "I mean, not legally. Diego forced me to sign papers that I didn't fully understand. He said it was for visa issues, so I could stay in Argentina legally. Only later did I discover that it was a marriage certificate. And the divorce? I tried to get it, but Diego disappeared. The lawyers said that, without him present, or without proof of abandonment, it would be almost impossible to dissolve the marriage in the Argentine system. Laura sat on the edge of the bed, her hands trembling. I was going to tell you, Matthew. I swear I was. But I was afraid that you wouldn't. Believe me, that you would think I was lying to take advantage of you. Matthew watched her, trying to discern truth from lies in her words. Part of him wanted to believe her, wanted to hug her and say that none of this mattered. But another part, the part that had been betrayed by Camilla, that had learned to distrust emotions, whispered doubts in his mind. Laura, he said carefully, do you realize the position this puts me in? My company, my family, my reputation, everything is at risk now. Laura's face contorted as if she had been slapped. I know, and I'm sorry. I never wanted this to happen. But it did. His voice came out harsher than he intended. And now I need to decide what to do. What do you mean? Matthew walked to the window, seeing the reporters still gathered outside. My mother has called a board meeting. If I can't control this situation, she could remove me from the presidency of the company. Then send me away. Laura's voice was broken, but there was a desperate determination in it. That's what you want, isn't it? That's what everyone wants. Laura. No, it's okay. I understand. She got up, walking to the closet and starting to take clothes out of the drawers that Matthew had provided for her. I always knew it was temporary. That reality would catch up with us eventually. What are you doing? I'm setting you free. Tears streamed down her face as she threw clothes into a small suitcase. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. You saved me, saved my daughter. But I can't destroy your life in return. Matthew watched her pack, part of him wanting to stop her, another part relieved that she was making the decision easier. Where are you going? I don't know, but I'll figure something out. I always do. She closed the suitcase and turned to him. Matthew, I need you to know, everything I said about my feelings for you was true. I loved you when we were young, and I fell in love with you again now. That wasn't a lie, Laura. And about the baby. She touched her belly. I'm never going to tell her who the biological father is. For her, if anyone asks, the father is you, because you were the first man who loved her even before she was born. And the words hit Matthew like knives. He took a step towards her, but Laura shook her head. Don't make this harder than it already is. She picked up the suitcase and walked towards the door. Take care of yourself, Matthew, and thank you for everything. She left the room, and Matthew heard her footsteps going down the stairs. The sound of the front door closing echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. He ran to the window and saw her walking down the street, the suitcase in one hand, the other protecting her belly, while the reporters surrounded her like vultures. Matthew stood at the window, watching the woman he loved disappear into the crowd of journalists, and for the first time in years felt tears stream down his face. He had gotten what he wanted, his life back, his reputation protected. So why did he feel like he had lost everything? 2 weeks had passed since Laura had left Matthew's mansion, and he couldn't concentrate on anything. The reporters had lost interest after a few days. Without new developments, the business partners had stopped asking embarrassing questions, and his mother had cancelled the emergency board meeting, satisfied with what she considered a sensible resolution of the situation. But Matthew didn't feel satisfied at all. He spent his nights awake, wondering where Laura was, if she was safe, if she was eating properly. He had discreetly hired an investigator to locate her, but the woman had simply disappeared. She wasn't in any boarding house downtown, hadn't sought social assistance, hadn't used a credit card anywhere. It was on a rainy Thursday that Sandra entered his office with a worried expression. "Mr. Vanderbilt, there's a woman here who insists on speaking with you. She says it's about Laura Drummond." Matthew looked up from the reports he was pretending to read. "What woman?" "She says her name is Beatrice Santos. Appears to be about 60 years old, very simple. She's accompanied by a young woman." "Send them up." Minutes later, Sandra introduced two women into the office. The older one was a black lady with grey hair, wearing simple but clean clothes, with intelligent and determined eyes. The young woman beside her, about 25 years old, was clearly her daughter. Same eyes, same proud bearing. "Mr. Vanderbilt," the older woman introduced herself, "I'm Beatrice Santos, and this is my daughter Carla. We came to talk about Laura." "You know her? Do you know where she is?" The urgency in Matthew's voice was undeniable. "She's with us," Carla replied. "Or rather, she was. Now she's in the hospital." Matthew's heart stopped. "Hospital? What happened?" Beatrice sat down in one of the armchairs without being invited, a gesture that demonstrated her determination. "She fainted last night. High blood pressure, extreme stress. The doctors said that if we can't stabilize her situation soon, she could lose the baby." "My God," Matthew stood up. "Which hospital? I need to see her." "She doesn't want to see you," Carla said firmly. "That's what she asked us to say if you asked." "But we came here for another reason," Beatrice continued. "Because we've known Laura for 2 weeks, and we know that the story that came out in the press isn't the whole truth." Matthew leaned forward. "How so?" "Laura appeared at my door one morning, completely lost. I run a shelter for women in situations of domestic violence in Harlem. She had nowhere else to go." Beatrice crossed her hands in her lap. "In the last 15 days, she told us her story. The real story." "Donna Beatrice," Carla interrupted gently. "Maybe it's better to show him." The older woman opened a worn bag and took out a folder of documents. "Laura gave us permission to bring this. They're copies of documents that she managed to keep from the time she lived in Argentina." Matthew took the papers, starting to read. They were police reports, all in Laura's name, reporting physical assaults by Diego Menendez. There were also medical records from a hospital in Buenos Aires, detailing injuries consistent with domestic violence. And finally, a handwritten letter in Spanish. "Can you read Spanish?" Beatrice asked. "A little. It's a letter that Diego wrote to Laura after she tried to leave him for the first time. He threatens to kill her if she tries to annul the marriage or if she tells anyone about the documents she signed, and he promises to stalk her wherever she goes." Matthew felt the anger rise in his chest as he read. "Why didn't she show me this?" "Because she was afraid," Carla replied. "Afraid that you wouldn't believe her, afraid of involving you in her problems, and mainly afraid that Diego would carry out his threats." "Where is he now?" "That's where it gets interesting," Beatrice said, exchanging a meaningful look with her daughter. "Laura received a call last week. It was him. He said he was in the United States and that he knew where she was." Matthew's blood ran cold. "He's here." "Not only that, he was the one who leaked the information to the press." Carla took another document from her bag. "Laura managed to record part of the telephone conversation. Do you want to hear it?" She placed an old cell phone on the table and pressed play. Diego's voice, with a heavy Argentine accent, filled the office. "You thought you could run away from me, Laura, that you could hide behind your Brazilian billionaire. Well, now he's going to know what kind of woman you really are. And when he kicks you to the curb, you'll come back to me. Because you're mine, you understand? Forever mine." Dates. The recording continued with Laura begging him to leave her alone and Diego laughing as he detailed how he had sold the information about her to a Brazilian journalist in exchange for money and the promise of ruining her new life. "But there's more," Beatrice said when the recording ended. Diego isn't working alone. What do you mean? Carla leaned forward. He mentioned that someone in the United States contacted him first. Someone who wanted to get rid of Laura and who paid for his plane ticket here. Who? He didn't say the name on the call, but... Beatrice hesitated. Laura told us about your mother, sir, about the threats she made. The realization hit Matthew like a lightning bolt. Helen. His own mother had orchestrated everything, had found Diego, brought him to the United States, and used him as a weapon to destroy Laura. Where is Laura now? He asked, already getting up. Harlem Municipal Hospital, Carla replied. But Mr. Vanderbilt, yes. Diego knows where she is, and he said on the call that he's going to get her as soon as she leaves the hospital. Beatrice stood up too. That man is dangerous. Laura showed us scars. He almost killed her once. Matthew was already grabbing his car keys. Not this time. I'm not going to let that happen. Mr. Vanderbilt, Carla called him as he was already at the door. There's one more thing you need to know. He turned around. Laura is in love with you, completely in love. She cries out your name every night, even after everything that has happened. And the only reason she doesn't want to see you is because she believes she deserves all the suffering she's going through. She said that? She said that she destroyed the life of the man she loves, and that now she needs to pay for it alone. Beatrice shook her head. That girl carries so much guilt that she's killing herself little by little. Matthew nodded, an iron determination forming in his chest. Thank you for coming to tell me this, for taking care of her. Where are you going? Carla asked. First to the hospital to see Laura, then... His voice became dangerously low. I'm going to have a very serious conversation with my mother. As Matthew left the office, his mind was already drawing up a plan. Helen had crossed a line that she shouldn't have crossed. She had used a violent man as a weapon against an innocent woman, putting at risk not only Laura, but also the child she was carrying. And now, Diego was loose in New York, looking for Laura. Time was running out, and Matthew knew that the next move would determine whether he could save the woman he loved or whether he would lose forever both her and the chance to be the man he always knew he could be. Harlem Municipal Hospital was a world away from the private medicine that Matthew knew. Overcrowded corridors, entire families camped on the floor waiting for treatment. The unmistakable smell of disinfectant mixed with human despair. Matthew followed Beatrice's directions to room 42 on the 3rd floor of the obstetrics ward. He stopped in front of the half-open door, seeing Laura lying on a narrow hospital bed, connected to monitors that showed her and the baby's heartbeats. Even sleeping, her face was tense, marked by exhaustion and stress. A young nurse was adjusting the IV in her arm. "Excuse me," Matthew addressed the nurse. "How is she?" The woman looked at him suspiciously. "Are you family?" "I'm the baby's father." "Oh, the famous billionaire." Her tone wasn't exactly hostile, but it carried judgment. "She's stable, but not good. Very high blood pressure, signs of severe preeclampsia. If we can't control it soon, we're going to have to do an emergency delivery. Can I talk to her?" She specifically asked not to receive visitors, especially you. Matthew took a deep breath. "Please, it's urgent. There's a dangerous man looking for her, and I need to warn her." The nurse studied his face, seeming to assess his sincerity. 5 minutes. If she asks you to leave, you leave. Laura opened her eyes when she heard his voice calling her name softly. For a moment, she seemed to be dreaming, but then reality hit her, and she tried to sit up in bed. "Matthew, what are you doing here?" "I came to warn you. Diego's in the United States. He's looking for you." Laura's face paled even further. "How do you know?" "Beatrice and Carla contacted me. They told me everything, Laura, about the violence, about the threats, about how you were forced to marry him. Matthew approached the bed. And I know who brought him here. Who? My mother. Laura closed her eyes, as if the confirmation of her worst fears was a physical blow. Of course, she wanted to get rid of me, and she found the perfect way. Laura, listen, we're getting out of here now. I'm going to take you to a safe place, and then we're going to resolve this situation once and for all. No. Her voice was firm, despite her weakness. I'm not dragging you further into my problems. You're not dragging me into anything. I'm choosing to be here, and your company, your reputation, your family. Matthew took her hand, interlacing their fingers. Without you, none of that matters. It took me 2 weeks to understand that, but now I understand. You're my family, Laura. You and this baby. Tears began to run down Laura's face. Matthew, you don't understand. Diego is dangerous. He's hurt me before, and he said he's going to kill me if I don't go back with him. Then he's going to have to kill me first. The determination in Matthew's voice made her look at him more closely. There was something different about him, a resolve she had never seen before. And what are you planning? I'm planning to end this, forever. He leaned in, kissing her forehead. But first I need you to get out of here. Beatrice said you can stay at her shelter until... Mr. Vanderbilt. The nurse appeared at the door, her face tense with worry. There's a man downstairs asking for her. He said he's her husband. Matthew's blood ran cold. What does he look like? Tall, dark, foreign accent. He's very agitated, saying he has the right to see his wife. Laura grabbed Matthew's arm, panic etched on her face. He found me. Is there a back exit? Matthew asked the nurse. There is, but call security. Tell them there's a man threatening a patient, and then lead us to the back exit. As the nurse ran out, Matthew helped Laura to her feet. She was weak and dizzy, but the adrenaline of fear gave her the strength to move. Matthew, she whispered as he supported her, if anything happens to me, nothing's going to happen. They managed to reach the service elevator when they heard shouts coming from downstairs. Diego's voice echoed through the corridors, demanding to see Laura, threatening the staff who were trying to stop him. Is he armed? Matthew asked Laura. I don't know. Maybe. The elevator descended in tense silence. When the doors opened on the ground floor, they could hear the commotion coming from the main lobby. The nurse led them through service corridors to a door that led to the back parking lot. My car is over there. Matthew pointed to the Mercedes. They had covered half the distance when they heard Diego's voice behind them. Laura! She turned around, and Matthew saw the man for the first time. Tall, well-dressed, with eyes that radiated a cold and controlled anger. He didn't look like the unhinged criminal Matthew had imagined, but someone much more dangerous, a calculating predator. You thought you could run away from me. Diego approached slowly, his hands in his pockets. That you could hide behind. This American playboy? Diego, please. Laura stepped forward, placing herself between him and Matthew. Leave us alone. I never did anything against you. You belong to me. We're married, remember? Till death do us part. You're not married, Matthew interjected, his voice firm. She was coerced into signing documents she didn't understand. That doesn't constitute a valid marriage. Diego laughed, a humorless sound. Ah, the knight in shining armor wants to defend his damsel. How romantic. His expression turned dangerous. But you don't know who you're dealing with, billionaire. I know exactly who I'm dealing with. A coward who hits women. The taunt had its effect. Diego lunged forward, pulling a knife from his pocket, but Matthew was prepared. Years of martial arts at an elite academy had taught him more than exercises. They had taught him how to defend himself. He dodged the first blow and landed a punch in Diego's face, causing him to stagger. Run, Laura! Matthew shouted, but she didn't move. The fight was brief but intense. Diego was more experienced in street violence, but Matthew had formal training and, more importantly, had something to fight for. When Diego tried to use the knife again, Matthew managed to disarm him and pin him to the ground. It was then that the hospital security arrived, followed by the police. Diego was handcuffed, still shouting threats in Spanish, promising that this wasn't over. "It's over," Matthew said, helping Laura to her feet. "He's going to be deported and prosecuted. He can't hurt you anymore." But Laura shook her head. "It's not over, Matthew. Your mother is still out there. She won't give up. Then we're going to resolve this now." An hour later, they were in Helen Vanderbilt's office, on the top floor of a skyscraper on Fifth Avenue. The family matriarch greeted them with a cold expression, clearly not expecting to see them together. Matthew and the famous Laura. Helen didn't get up from her executive chair. "I imagine you're here to make some kind of blackmail." "We're here to end this," Matthew replied, placing a folder on her desk. "These are all the documents that prove that you brought Diego Menendez to the United States specifically to threaten Laura. Conspiracy, harassment, coercion. Enough crimes to put you in jail." Helen leafed through the papers with an impassive expression. "And what do you want?" "We want you to stop. Stop trying to destroy Laura. Stop trying to control my life. Stop using our company as a personal weapon. And if I refuse, then these documents go to the police and to the press, and I use my 45% of the shares to call an extraordinary meeting and remove you from any executive position in the company." Helen studied her son in silence for long moments. "You would do that? Destroy our family for this woman?" "I would save our family from becoming something even worse than it already has become." Matthew took Laura's hand. "Mother, Laura is going to be my wife. The child she carries is going to be your granddaughter. You can choose to be part of our family, or you can choose to be our enemy. But you're not going to interfere in our lives anymore." The silence in the room was deafening. Helen looked at Laura, who remained silent, allowing Matthew to fight this battle alone. "Very well," Helen said finally. "You win, but don't expect me to approve of this union." "We don't expect you to," Laura spoke for the first time. "We just expect you to leave us alone." 6 months later, on a sunny spring morning, Matthew was in the delivery room holding Laura's hand as she gave the final pushes to bring their daughter into the world. When the loud, healthy cry echoed through the room, he felt tears stream down his face. "It's a girl," the doctor announced, placing the baby on Laura's chest. Matthew looked at the child, small, red, perfect, and knew that he had found the meaning of his life. Laura looked at him with tears of joy in her eyes. "Do you want to hold her?" she asked. When Matthew took the baby in his arms, she stopped crying and looked at him with dark, curious eyes. "Hi, little one," he whispered. "I'm your daddy." "What are we going to call her?" Laura asked. "Hope," Matthew replied without hesitation, "because that's what you brought into my life. Hope." Laura smiled. The broken and desperate woman who had appeared in his office a year ago now transformed into a wife, a mother, and the most important person in his life. Hope Vanderbilt, she tested the name. Perfect. Outside the delivery room, Helen Vanderbilt watched through the glass window, seeing her son holding his granddaughter in his arms. For a moment, her hardened expression softened. Maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong about Laura. Maybe some battles weren't worth fighting, but that would be a story for another day. For now, Matthew, Laura, and little Hope had found their own version of forever. A family built not on blood or convenience, but on love, forgiveness, and the courage to fight for what really mattered.